the 5th day of June 2023. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana Durnford, also known as the BAST. (709-589-4406). You can text me. You can phone in. Let's have a conversation. We've got a lot of the original news from 2011 that we haven't covered on this site before. Consider sharing or subscribing or clicking bells or whatever else it is you got to do to make this thing work proper. So last night I'm just going to recap last night's the new numbers for renewable energies that the industry's freaked out over the last couple of days. They're panicking now. They're spitting on renewables. New wind and solar up 50% globally in 2020. So it was there was 261 gigawatts, equal to 300 nuclear power plants coming online in 12 months. Take that size well. International energy in 2021 seen renewables overtaking fossil fuels. So they're talking global, right? And so they're trying to be fudging the numbers this year. It was 290 gigawatts last year, which is equal to 330 large nuclear power plants. And they expect that renewables between 2020 and 2026 will grow by 4,800 gigawatts, which is roughly the capacity of all fossil fuel and nuclear on the planet. New global renewable capacities additions to rise a third year, by a third this year. This is the third year we've seen this massive spike in renewables. And it was equal to all the energy of Germany and Spain coming online in renewables in 12 months. But unfortunately, they have scuttled storage. There's many, many different ways to store energy. And the industry knows that when you start storing renewables, everything else dies shortly after. And they're making it worse by doing the things they're doing, because the world will hate them in the near future for it. Renewable capacity worldwide is set to jump by 107 gigawatts to 440 gigawatts. Last year was 291. This year is 440 gigawatts. That's massive. So you really think, you must understand it's going to jump significantly next year and the year after, because there's all these other projects are in the pipeline that'll come online, right? Because the push is on now. But the problem is actually radioactive fallout, but it doesn't hurt. We barely use geothermal energy. We barely use it worldwide. And Sonoma County geothermal energy leaders say underground heat is the key to reverse global warming. That's quite the statement. Unearthing Europe's hidden gem, geothermal energy. Airports switching to geothermal energy. It's time to turn up the heat and support geothermal energy. So they expect to sell $50 billion worth of drilling bits over the next decade. $50 billion. So for drilling bits. So somebody's expecting a big push for geothermal. When will geothermal energy go mainstream? Well, it's been suppressed because it doesn't need no commodities, no gas, no oil, no coal, ever. It can actually run on just solar and wind power for electrical, but you can actually feed back into itself, unlike a nuclear power plant. Okay, we got through that stuff. Fukushima, naughty, that's Stumper Reactor 3 and the Stumper Reactor 4. So we're going to poll tonight. Help wanted ad. Should nuclear scientists stop killing the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language at nuclear meltdowns? And we're off and running with 17 votes. Help Wanted ad seeks employees at the nuclear meltdown that can carry out a conversation. That rules out nuclear scientists. Be sure they can't carry on a conversation. Seniors sought for frontline radiation cleanup in Japan. Seniors. Not nuclear students, not nuclear academics, not volunteers from all the closed nuclear power plants across Japan. No. The first thing they want to do is throw the seniors away, the people who built the country, the foundation of the country. The brains, actually, of the country. Japan media, Fukushima is the same as the war, said a military officer in charge. Concerned workers in site do not consent to join the battle. People are held hostage. Unprecedented ocean contamination and leaks are out of control. Dana, fearmonger, and nuclear scientist, Mom, come down. Dana's fearmongering again. This was an interesting statement.
Another example, immediately after the first hydrogen explosion, TEPCO gave out an order a request to all of these labor dispatching companies, and they said, send us people who don't mind dying. At that time, it was really very much a panic situation, perhaps.
Send us people who don't mind dying. Vice Governor suggests Fukushima draft. All of Japan must face it. Fukushima draft going to war, right? Fukushima worker wanted to escape. Does that sound like a nuclear scientist to anybody? But feared he might hurt me. Does that sound like nuclear experts to anybody? They called my mother to tell her I was in trouble. Does that sound like somebody with serious mental health issues? Or is it just a child? Because that's what we're talking about. And this is why we got a poll, right? Should the nuclear scientists stop killing, murdering? Let me rephrase this. Should the degenerate, disgusting, despicable, revolting, hideous, unbelievable, hideous nuclear scientists stop killing, murdering the homeless, the destitute, the immigrants who don't speak the language, and the victims of society at the nuclear meltdowns? Yeah, Dana, yeah. The unskilled and destitute are the hiring targets. What a revolting industry, eh? It's predatory industry. Can't survive without being a predator. Top Tokyo, it kills everything with replicating cells on top of that. Top Tokyo doctor dealing with the nuclear workers demanded government step in at Fukushima plant for safety reasons. Because some of the employees can't even read. Mom, the scientists can't read anymore. No, these are the homeless. Should nuclear scientists, murderers, aka murderers, stop slaughtering the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society? I think it's probably a good idea, like other people. Fukushima worker filmed at the plant that was asked to fake documents. Underage people employed. What a despicable industry. What a coward thing to do. Guardian on Fukushima worker, we felt like kamikaze pilots, which is appropriate. Acute radiation sickness. You die next week. There's over 800 people disappeared from the nuclear plant. Mom, there's 800 nuclear scientists missing. No, honey, that's the homeless. May have been killed or died. There's parts of the site they still don't have control over. It's so deadly. Government's in business with the mob. Think about this derogatory, degenerate connotations in this one. It's time to make a geezers suicide squad. So they don't even cover their parents or their elderly. What a despicable society. Some people not even being given food or have no place to go. So children are at their mom, scientists aren't even given food. I got Netflix put out a 7 or 8 part Fukushima docudrama based on propaganda, and I got all 7 of them. I haven't watched them yet. I'm going to binge watch them maybe tomorrow, and we're going to challenge every one of them. It's disgusting. I'm sick of it. Sick of the cowards. I'm sick of the acquiescing. Sick of the all these people with no backbones. I didn't know that you can stand up straight without a backbone, but I can guarantee you can do it. We show this stuff every night, right? Some people not being given food. The 60 and older should be prepared to die if your gas plant breaks down. No. 60 and older should be prepared to die if your coal plant breaks down. Dana, right? Right, Dana? Right. No. 60 and older should be prepared to die if your diesel plant breaks down. Right, Dana? Yeah. No. 60 and older should be prepared to die if the nuclear power plant goes boom. Uh-huh. Why have you got that in your country? Is sacrificing everybody in your country 60 and older worth sacrificing for a couple of light bulbs in your homes? Well, honey, bad news. The nuclear plant melted down. I'll tell the kids that you said you loved them. Now get on over to Fukushima and sacrifice your light so we can have light and power. See, that industry shouldn't exist. Any industry that has to do this to resolve a broken plant, I'm just taking a wild swing in the dark here, but probably shouldn't exist. So I couldn't put everything in the poll because you only got 100 caricatures. So should 60 and older be prepared to die at the Fukushima nuclear power plant? Should we do that for a poll tomorrow night? That's crazy. That's crazy. But it's nuclear. That's why we love nuclear, because they're fucking crazies. They're crazies, man. Literally, I'm always shocked when I see one of them driving a vehicle. I'm like, oh, fuck, a functional savant. Never would have guessed it. Because I can guarantee you the majority of them can't drive a car. This is outrageous. This is Forbes, for fuck's sake. Now I'm going to denigrate into that. Let me back it up a second here. Back that trolley up. Let's reboot. Get back to normal mode. Deep breaths. This is outrageous, said Forbes. The homeless people are being sold to companies and put to work on Fukushima radiation. How the hell did I end up over? Oh, that's right. We're still doing the intro. So homeless, now Forbes is outrageous, but even Forbes said this is madness. So when Forbes says something is madness, trust me, it's pretty bad. This is outrageous. Homeless people are being sold to companies and sacrificed for light bulbs. This is why we got a poll. Should nuclear tart scientists stop killing the homeless, the destitute, and the victims of society to make a paycheck at nuclear meltdowns? Should they? Should they? UN official astounded the homeless are taking work in Fukushima ready to die. At the end of the month, they're making an average of about $11 an hour to do the most heroic job in history. Homeless are taken to work in Fukushima ready to die. At the end of the month, they're left with no pay if they're still alive. And they end up in debt to the mob after food and housing fees are deducted. And they got pounded with gammas and alphas and neutrons, betas, x-rays. The mentally handicapped were working at Fukushima plant after the meltdowns, often given second-hand paper suits. See, that's why we got a poll. Right there, baby. So should degenerate, despicable, cowardly nuclear scientists stop murdering the homeless and the destitute and the immigrants that don't speak the language and victims of society at the nuclear disease factories when they melt down? Huh? I'm just asking. I'm not trying to be mean or anything. Workers are tricked into being on the front line of Fukushima. Mom, they're tricking nuclear scientists to get in the front lines of Fukushima. What are we going to do for them? Don't worry, honey. It's just the homeless. They're disposable. Oh, okay. I can't wait to grow up and be a nuclear scientist, too. There's nowhere else to go. Everyone is stuck. You're brainwashed, and after a few days, they throw you away. Literally and figuratively. Japan's government is looking for kamikaze decontamination workers for the nuclear meltdown jobs. Pays $11 an hour, too. Pretty cool. Your boss got tattoos. People taken from movie theaters by the police, this is 1957, and forced to go into reactors in Sellafield, United Kingdom, at a mixed oxide meltdown. Military men were picking men off the street to battle the meltdown. Women, minorities, homeless, and prisoners are used by the industry for the most dangerous works. And there was a documentary about it. And I took the documentary, and then I put in all the graphics. And so the original documentary is just a clip from YouTube. You'll see it I poked it in the screen up there like a movie theater screen. And then I put the people in there and the projector there and the other chummies you're going to see coming up here.
The police.
We start that again.
The
so they had a meltdown and they went to the theaters in particular and the streets, but this is about the theaters, and kidnapped people from the back rows of the theaters. They didn't go looking for volunteers at the universities and nuclear power plants. No.
The police from the factory had turned up looking for volunteers, and they'd brought a bus, and they decided the best way to get the volunteers was to go to the cinema and volunteer the back two rows at the show to go into the factory to. As it turned out, to help push the fuel rods out of the reactor.
But they had all kinds of universities teaching nuclear. There's all kinds of nuclear companies. There's all kinds of people from the power plant, 1,000 people that worked at the power plant. They didn't volunteer, none of them. They went to the theaters. And back in 1957, the poor people sat in the back rows, right? So that concludes the poll tonight, the intro. Should nuclear scientists stop murdering the homeless and destitute and the victims of society at nuclear meltdowns around the world? And we have a resounding yes. The moment nuclear plant chief, TEPCO's chief, cried, they call it WEPT, Japanese finally admit that the radiation leak is serious enough to kill people. What's the date on that, Dana? That, my dear friend, that's a great question, is the 19th of March, give or take a few hours. Oh, let me fix that. Fix your shit, Dana. We got some pictures. I'm gonna go over to another time and dimension where I can zoom in. Giggity. They made a radiation leak. Every time I hear the word leak, it enrages me, eh? It's serious enough to kill people. Japanese upgrade Yaxin from a level 4, the same as 3 Mile Island. They There's a little weeper right there. Hello, weeper. I don't see no tears in his eyes. Nothing. He's worried everybody's going to tear his head off his shoulders, probably. Does he look like he's crying? Anybody? Let's get in on that big stupid forehead of his and have a look here. Well, he doesn't look like he's crying. Can we look at his eyeballs from here? I don't think we can we? No. He's not crying, he's faking it. That's all I'm saying, right? Okay? For the record, that's what I'm saying. I'm sticking with it. Particles spewed from a nuclear meltdown. Like, you won't hear him saying radioactive fallout is hemorrhaging from the reactors and covering the planet in an invisible dust which will eventually harm all the species permanently. No. Radiation spewing from overheating reactors. They're not overheating, and they know this. Like, only the nuclear industry would write something like that. A journalist would never write something like that. Because we used to have them years ago, right? These creatures now are creatures, not journalists. And fuel rods was enough to kill some citizens, but not nuclear scientists, because they're secretly Hulks and Spider-Man, right? That's why he's crying, because he thinks somebody's going to kill him, and the crowd there. Overwhelmed. Well, maybe he was crying a long time, Dana. He didn't have any tears left. That's probably what's going on. After a press conference. Oh, shit, my boss is going to beat me with a stick. Leaking. I get really offended whenever I see leaking. The explosion was felt 25 miles away, for God's sakes. That's okay. That's just tomatoes. So does the building next to it, does that look like it's leaking to anybody? Hang on here, I'll make it big. Make it big for me, Dana. That sounds bad. Does it look like that's leaking? Like, what's leaking, Dana? You know, the stump of reactor 3. Let's keep going here. Gotta watch me. I get caught up in this stuff sometimes. It's just genocide. It's nothing big, no big deal. It's just omnicide. Officials should have admitted earlier how serious the radiation leaks were. That's what they said about Monticello there last month. They waited 4 months before they told people, and then they checked for radiation 4 months after. Didn't find nothing. Have a great day. Officials should have admitted earlier how serious the radiation leaks were. Geez, that's a novel idea. I never thought about that. That actually makes sense. Where the hell did that come from? The unprecedented scale of the earthquake and tsunami that struck Japan, frankly speaking, was among many things that happened that had not been anticipated under our disaster management contingency plan. Well, Lordy be. It is now official on par with 3 Mile Island. What was the date on this? Was this the 19th? I gotta go back just to double check and make sure my brain is actually working here. No, yeah, that's the 19th, all right. These are some naughty people. Now officially on par with 3 Mile Island. Only the explosion at Chernobyl has topped the scale. Fukushima had multiple reactor buildings, and it was 4 decades old. Chernobyl was brand new. It was 2 years old. And at Japan, they had 2 fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings. And so there's 8 fuel pools gone for sure. And 4 large reactors with significant more uranium, plutonium gone. And one of them was actually mixed oxide fuel. It's gone. It's equal to hundreds and hundreds of Chernobyls. And so I got the luxury of hindsight, but they're supposed to be journalists. And the pictures, by the 19th, we already knew it looked like that. There was nothing left. And so they elected, and we see this, they were vicious. Now I'm officially on par with 3 Mile Island. Yeah, Three Mile Island is just... It doesn't even make sense that they can be that evil. Like if you can look and see your nuclear power plant, you're 50 miles too close. A plant mishap, leaks. See the word leaks? Actually leaks. Now 3 Mile Island, a crazy thing about 3 Mile Island, they boiled off 2.3 million gallons of water. Arnie Gunnison and Lake Barrett were running the show. Small amounts of one radioactive element, tritium. And so when you hear tritium, that's the cover-up. Will be gradually released into the air in the form of steam for 18 to 24 months. And that the release will affect people living within 50 miles, which was 2 million people, will get the same amount of radiation they received from a year of watching color television. Yes, they actually said that. That's contempt on a whole different scale. Not that TVs back then were pretty damn bad, right? You didn't want to sit too close to those bastards. But you turn them on, you turn them off, and you can control it. But this is lethal. Your body's going to attack everything with white blood cells for the rest of your life. This is going to pulse energy at the speed of light and wreck your chromosomes, your DNA, your genetic makeup, your organs, put lesions in your organs, which is permanent. And TV is just TV, right? But still, the frequency of the TV was set at the same frequency as the child's brain. So you can yell at the kid couldn't hear you. The kid was lost. They were in whatever they were watching on TV. They get sucked right into it. Drop dead met Ed. And so the reason you have sirens around nuclear power plants is 3 Mile Island. But 3 Mile Island has nothing, on Santa Susana. Santa Susana was 460 3 Mile Islands. But why we're talking about it, remember Ernest Sternglass? The first scientist put a number on the U.S. nuclear deaths, dies at 91. He reported U.S. infant mortality, which had plunged steadily through the 20th century, was essentially unchanged in the 50s and 60s. Roughly 375,000 excess deaths. The cause, the author is Sternglass, physicist, University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine professor, theorized stagnation in infant death progress was the result of atomic bomb tests followed. And he never stopped, right? He never stopped. The nuclear fallout never went away. So that was the pivoting point when we've seen a catastrophic infant mortalities worldwide. There's 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. There's heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. And when you get radiation in the thyroid, it's the pituitary gland stores the radioactive hormones, but you're still flooding your body with radioactive hormones, or the children, and it gets in their bones and mutates their stem cells. And when you look at the species, because they're so quick in generations, the vulnerable ones, you expect to see them decimated, and that's what we're seeing 12 years after the big pulse from Japan. This was the tipping point. Fukushima was the tipping point. A UN official said radiation reaching America is about 1 billion times beneath the health-threatening levels. I got the only word there true is billions. It's actually, the radiation that hit the U.S. is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. It's greater than any work of man other than atomic bomb. It's like explosions. It's like explosions going off every second for each atom, and it can affect or all of your organs with each explosion. IAEA admits there's no such thing as a safe level, and that their standards are based on benefit, which is natural stuff, not man-made, which is safety. That should blow your mind, actually, see? So the IAEA should be disbanded and prosecuted, because countries default use the language from UN, which is a big think tank. It's a corporation like McDonald's. It's a great big think tank, and has taken over 195 countries. It's absurd. It used to be called the League of Nations before Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? They changed the name because they were so evil, and then they went over and used conventional nukes on North Korea, which is the same amount of bombs as everything they used in World War One. All the same amount of munitions and bombs as they used in World War One, they used on North Korea, which was enslaved for 50 years before that by Japan. And then the United Nations went in and bombed them into existence, out of existence, and then vilified and demonized them now for 70 years so they can have a boogeyman. And that was United Nations. MacArthur, he was basically fired because he had come back and he had said, look, I seen about as much blood, gore, and guts as any human has ever seen. And what I seen in North Korea curled my stomach. And I threw up, and I couldn't do it no more. They napalmed every village there, and now for 70 years they've demonized them when they haven't attacked anybody for at least 120 years. Airborne plumes of radiation expected to be sweeping across Europe. And again, officials stress the levels reaching the UK will be like a banana and a potato chip, and walking in the sunshine and getting on an airplane and sleeping next to somebody. Oh, by the way, it's not. Sheep farmers still stuck under Chernobyl cloud. They closed over 9,400 farms. Over 400 are still closed today because of radiation. And which means you couldn't drink the water in the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Scotland, or breathe the air. And it's not just cesium, see? And it's very offensive when I hear cesium and iodine, because it's weaponized to misrepresent the enormity of what's going on. Lars Erik de Geer of the Swedish Defense Research Institute, the big shot of big shots, said particles would eventually be detected across Europe. It's not something you see normally, but it's not high from any danger point of view. It is only a question of very, very low activities, so it's nothing for the slaves and victims to worry about. Think about that statement. He's the Swedish Defense Research Institute, and he completely misrepresented every facet of the story. By the way, did I mention the IAEA admitted there's no such thing as a safe level, that their standards for radiation are based on natural, not man-made? So all of these big organizations, their job is to screw you over. That's his job, right? The Swedish Defense Research Institute, the International Atomic Energy Agencies, and we cover them constantly. The heads, the best of the best, and they're like a banana. Have a nice day. I gotta go back to my swimming pool we're building on my summer home in Barbados. The predictions the particles could reach Britain within 2 weeks is based on previous data gathered by scientists, you're gonna love this, observing nuclear testing in China. We're talking about Britain that went down to Australia, waited for the wind to blow across Australia, and then set off their nuclear bombs. You know, Britain. It boggles my mind how evil the industry actually is. And we cover it 5 days a week, and it still shocks the shit out of me. I see if Great Britain gets covered in this one. This model is in the bottom right-hand corner is based on 19.5 days. Yeah, Britain's culvert and radiation. The numbers were around 220 million atoms per liter. The latest picture shows a whole wall missing from the building housing the reactor number 4. And there's a green crane normally used to move spent fuel rods into the storage pool can be seen. Under the crane, but not seen in the pictures, the 45-foot deep spent fuel storage pool, which is boiled dry. Boiled dry. Well, they boil dry because the fuel rods are burning. I screwed that up. How did that happen? So the building to your left doesn't even exist anymore, but the people to the right are pretending they're in that same fuel pool. So like going out and listening to the official stories, it's the equivalent to getting a lobotomy, right? There was a breakthrough when engineers succeeded in connecting power lines to reactor 2. This is on the 19th, 8 days after the tsunami. Reactor 2 liquefied. There was a potential breakthrough when they connected power to reactor 2. Reactor 2 is right in the middle between reactor 1 meltdown, reactor 3 meltdown, and reactor 4 meltdown. Those stacks are around 25 sieverts at the bottom of it. Like, there's zero possibility, it's zero, that anybody was there or connecting power. It's zero possibility, and they knew it. That's what, like, you had to be from the nuclear industry to write the story the way he wrote it. And in order to write it the way they wrote it, they had to know what was happening to tell that kind of lie. That's what he told that specific lie, is because of what they knew had happened. And so the journalists who put their name on the story the moment the nuclear plant chief wept, as Japanese, which he didn't weep at all, notice he didn't say cried, as Japanese finally admit the radiation leak is serious enough to kill the citizens, kill people. There was a potential breakthrough when the engineers succeeded in connecting power line to the building that don't exist no more, only in shell, reactor 2, would enable them to restore electricity to the cooling pumps needed to prevent a meltdown. Of course, this is ludicrous. 4 to 6 reactors at the site have been hit by explosions and fires and sent clouds of low-level radiation from explosions and fires and meltdowns. You gotta be a nuclear lobbyist to know to write something like that. That's not, like, to be able to tell all the lies that they told in this single story. It's taken us almost an hour to cover it, and we're still not through them all. You can't challenge every one of their lies. And we do it because I'm stupid, right? I'm like, bang into a wall, and I'm like, that didn't just happen. And bang into the wall again. There won't be no wall when I do it the next 30 times you watch. Apologize for slopping. That comes with it. The team of exhausted workers battling to prevent the meltdown, dubbed the Fukushima 350,000, unable to approach the most badly damaged reactors because the radiation levels are so high. Yesterday, concern focused on 2 large tanks used to store spent nuclear fuel at reactor 3 and 4. Hydrogen explosions, which is the meltdown, blew the roof off both of the buildings, leaving the pools exposed to the elements. Let's check it out. I can't find the fuel pool. Can you find the fuel pool? Bend your tail on the fuel pool. These are lethal doses everywhere. Just standing on the roof is a lethal immediately dose. And whenever you see these pictures, right, you see over there the world's biggest cement truck. They flew in from Ruskies. And that took them, 8-9 days or something to dig a hole so they can get that thing in there. It was like 2 weeks before they done it. And it's pointless. Nothing exists. It's just purely for the pictures and cameras. Waste in reactor 3 is completely exposed to the air, emitting alarming levels of radiation as it heats up. George? Really, Timmy? Well, reactor 3 actually doesn't even exist. Oh, man. They tell so many lies that trying to point them all out, sometimes you almost feel like it's futile. There's so many of them. How the hell do you keep up with it all? Now, the fuel pool is at the top of the building. See it? Do you get how batshit crazy this industry actually is? So they're claiming the fuel pool is heating up, but this was the 15th, not the 19th, which is when they wrote the story. And in order to write the story, you had to know the building looked like that the fuel pools are gone. Despite that, in 2020, they said they were getting all the fuel out of the pools. There is no pools. And just one great big stupid bunch of lunatics. That's what the nuclear industry, the best way to describe it. A bunch of maniacs that are completely insane. All right, okay. Like the other reactors which use uranium, reactor 3 uses a mixed uranium-plutonium. Well, this is reclaimed uranium-plutonium. Best known as ingredients in a nuclear weapon with a bit of flour and syrup and yeast. It is particularly dangerous if it's released into the environment. In fact, they say a couple of kilograms is enough to kill all the species on the planet eventually. We released 21,000 pounds of it at least in just the reactors. The worst case scenario exposed, which is 2% of the fuel, right? Exposed fuel will melt, triggering a chemical explosion that sends radioactive dust hundreds of yards to the air. Well, it covered the planet. Yeah, it cut 100 yards, like 1 mile, including the fuel pool and the reactor core, I might add. Because when you watch the video, that's what you're going to see falling back down. And this is April the 7th. Just 3 weeks later. Well, almost 4, well, a little over 3 weeks later, the plume is covering the planet. So when they say we'll send radioactive dust hundreds of yards into the air, they forgot to mention and cover the entire planet. The Chinook helicopters flying at less than 300 feet dropped 4 loads of water over the wrecked buildings. Wrecked? Nuclear meltdowns. In the hopes of some water would seep, think about that statement, seep, into the dried out fuel pools and cool the fuel. Like when I first read that, I actually had a seizure. I fell down on the floor and I woke up and I was like, wow, I need sugar or something. I think I just had a seizure. All 600 helicopter pilots in Chernobyl died in the first couple of weeks. Every one of them. They were buying brand new helicopters. You could only use them once. Because if you got the next people got aboard of it died before they could take off because it was so radioactive. They have graveyards of helicopters and tanks and fire trucks down there, right? Some water would seep into the dried out pool. Well, they only tried 4 times. And in Chernobyl, helicopters would fall right out of the sky. People getting lethal doses. They just fall. They would just die up there, and the helicopter would tumble down on top of the reactor building. They're still there today. You couldn't retrieve the helicopters that fell on the building, right? Officials scanned people for radiation 60 kilometers in Koriyama, which they didn't evacuate Koriyama because 60 kilometers away, Unsclear had in 2012 put this cesium disposition model and associated with absorbed doses of red bone marrow for the first year. And that the highlight was the name of the communities over there. The next line is the people in the community, and this line here is becquerels per square feet of cesium. And pretending uranium, plutonium doesn't exist and all the other stuff. But Koriyama City, 341,000 at 162,000 per cubic per square meter in the community. And every house in Koriyama is entitled to decontamination, but you can't decontaminate a house, which I think is around 90,000 houses, I believe. We cover this stuff, right? But because we cover so much for so long, some of the details don't quite make it. If you're in Koriyama, you're incredibly radioactive. And these Geiger counters will break and have to go back to the factory and get recalibrated if you get a big load, a big dose, and they're getting big doses. They're like, no, you're okay. There was one guy, though, a little while ago. Yeah, he's the guy who broke the Geiger counter. Yoshi Sumatsu, former editor with the Japanese Times, the Sunday editor himself, right? I done a radio show with him for 2 years on Sundays. He wrote in to Fukushima, Okuma, and Furubar on a bicycle with 3 Geiger counters and a full set of teeth. And he rode out with 3 broken Geiger counters, and 2 weeks later he only had half his teeth. The rest fell out. It's absurd numbers, he said. And what they're doing there is just meant to hoodwink the pop. These people are not even academics, right? These are just people given the Geiger counters. If it beeps really loud, tell them to go over there and stand up for a while. And then they have these contraptions. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags in surrounding areas, but these people never had no radiations. Do you get it? It's a worthless industry. The people in it are literally worthless people. Radiation levels within the plant rose to 3.7 sieverts to 2.4, or to 4 sieverts. These are lethal doses. Many will die. That's an unusual statement, right? That's why these particular shows last night and tonight, and I got a playlist with 2 more in it I've done over the last couple of weeks. These are really important stories. They teach you so much about radiation that you can apply to current radiation. So, like tomorrow night, we'll be going back into the 24-hour news cycle. But this information is what is the really educational material. Unfortunately, they tell you so many lies. It's absurd. It's absurd. It's literally every second, third sentence is a fucking lie. We're still on that same story. It's madness. So, and these are like, the levels it was way worse than this. You blew the fuel rods out of the reactor cores and the reactor cores out of some of the buildings. You blew the fuel pools, ejected it out of some buildings, melted and burned constantly in others for days. And so right at ground zero, well, first off, the stacks were 25 sieverts at this point. So you walk past the stacks quite a ways away from the reactors, you drop dead. So, because I went through all of Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Oxford, MIT, Berkeley, all the major shakers and movers, and done presentations on their presentations of Fukushima, and it's the same as what you're seeing tonight. Lie after lie after lie after lie. And I find it really offensive. But we got Gordo. Gordo is going to introduce you to lethal doses of radiation. He's from Harvard, and this is, I'm not sure what the date was. It was a week later or something. But you can see he's very subdued in the way he talks about it.
In the US context, we think of RAM, and I assume in the Japanese context, people would think of sievert. The fatal dose from whole body exposure, median dose is around 350, 400 RAM, or 3.5 to 4 sievert.
Delivered pretty quickly.
Delivered over a period of hours, but in that case, death would follow over subsequent weeks.
Because if you get a hard dose, it'll die that afternoon or 20 minutes later. It'll melt your organs.
But that gives you an indication of the sort of hazard that you're concerned. So a few sieverts, if the dose looks as though it'll be more than 2 or 3 sieverts over a period of plume passage, for example, then you know that you're in a potentially lethal situation. Whereas speaking in microsieverts is not helpful.
So microsieverts is not helpful. Where the hell is Dana? Hi, everybody. So 3 to 4 sieverts is a lethal dose, and they were getting lethal doses. So there was no nuclear scientists rushing to go down to Fukushima. There was no volunteers from other nuclear power plants rushing to go to Fukushima. No university students were rushing to go to Fukushima to help out. God bless the Fukushima 50 homeless and destitute victims of society. Today, Tokyo Electric Power Company, which owns the plant, which is not a decommissioned authority, and many organizations, and even Fukushima Prefecture government call for their removals, will try to restart the cooling system after workers connected a half-a-mile-long power cable from the national grid to Reactor 2. Reactor 2 liquefied. Steam and smoke rising from all 4 melted reactors. Workers were evacuated. That's the 23rd. The story we're talking about is on the 19th. Like, there was no Fukushima 50 doing what they were claiming. There might have been 50 people left on the site, but they weren't doing this. And see, the official story is the Fukushima 50 stopped all of the... Fukushima 50 made sure this didn't happen. That's the official story about Fukushima 50. That's what Netflix is portraying, right? That this never happened. It's going to be a doozy. I'll probably start watching it tomorrow, unless I got a weak stomach. Then I might have to wait for the next day. But I don't want to watch this stuff on a weak stomach, because the lies are going to be just... It's really something, you know, when I'm going through this and I read the lie and I'm cursing under my breath. Dirty bastards. Last night, 14,000 were confirmed dead or missing in Japan, and 500,000 are homeless. Fleeing passengers query at the ticket counter to buy tickets for the earliest flight to get the frig out of Tokyo. And they were the smart ones, right? They looked back, they're like, holy shit, we had to stay there. There's 865,000 extra cancers in just the first year. Poison particles from nuke plant found in at least 12 U.S. states. Well, see, radiation is very predictable. It doesn't just go to 12 U.S. states. Washington was at 450,000 times above detection levels. We'll get to that in a second. Traces of radioactive iodine from Fukushima found in Alabama, Washington. Number of states to find radiation traces increasing every day. Hundreds of pregnant women flee at-risk areas. Because, 50 becquerels a kilogram in adults lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs, and it's all downhill after that. Radiation Fukushima leak has been detected in at least 12 United States, and believe it will reach more in the coming days. Japan puts on maximum alert. Let me go backwards for a second. I got to look at the date on that one more time. That's the 30th of March. That's 20 days later. Here's 7 days after the tsunami, 4 days after the reactors starting to blow up. Not all of them are blown up. 1 million times normal over the U.S. And that's on the 18th, 7 days later. And they're talking cesium-137. All the other isotopes are there, but it's very unusual to catch them using these numbers, these names and these numbers. 1 million to 10 million times after Fukushima. And so it shows the plume covering it. And the plume is continuous, right? This is only 7 days. This is going to get infinitely... And we show those models. Alabama, increasing every day. We'll get to it. Though the trace levels are very low, not hazardous to the health. By the way, they are. You have 450,000 times above detection levels of xenon. You have 1 to 10 million times of cesium-137. There's no mistaking what's going on when you got two of them. We got many, many more, right? And when you think about Taiwan, told people to stay home and get rid of their clothing, and so did Korea. And America got pounded. And you only need a small amount to make you sick. America got pounded by massive numbers of different isotopes. And this is their version. Like, radiation doesn't just fall in those states. The U.S. government actually released their model in particles, cesium, covering the northern hemisphere. And I got the model, I'll just play it. It's based on 40 days of fallout. That's 40 days of fallout of cesium. I think this model also was used in iodine, but this was the vented numbers. This wasn't the actual inventories from the melted and destroyed reactor buildings. This was the ventings. So when it stops, we're at 40 days, 40 nights. And again, it's only based on venting. It's not based on the actual destroyed buildings and the massive inventories that dwarfs Chernobyl, right? These types of findings are to be expected in the coming days. They're still far below the levels of a public health concern, the Center for Disease Control said. So what's the point to have the Center for Disease Control? Here's NOAA's model, the American government model. And I'll put you at 30 days, which is when this story, was it 30 days? That story came out? That came out on 30th, rather, so that's 19 days. So let's look for 19 days on this. Where are you to? 19, lucky 19, right there. So that's radioactive fallout according to the Americans. And according to the Center for Disease Control, it never happened. 25 times below the level would be concerned for use as a sole source of water over a short period of time, even for infants, pregnant women, or breastfeeding women who are the most sensitive to radiation. 11 becquerels a kilogram, children will see permanent damage to their hearts, and 50 becquerels a kilogram, adults will see permanent damage to their organs, and then you're in very bad shape for the rest of your life now, right? And it's pulsing inside your body every second at the speed of light. So the Center for Disease, all the biggest organizations ran out and stabbed you in the back as many times as they could. It comes with radioactive water, plutonium-contaminated soil outside the plant at Fukushima, where brave workers are battling to stop a meltdown. But March the 30th, they were well aware this was gone. There was no illusions that the reactors were gone, the fuel pools were gone to those who understood the topic. There was no illusions. And whoever wrote these stories had to know what was going on. Unusual, yet still very low trace amounts, which was not. It was 220 million atoms per liter of 129 iodines, 20 million of iodine 131 per liter, sustained. It was 450,000 of the xenon 133. There was cesium 137 at 1 to 10 million becquerels a cubic meter of air. There were stories of the sulfur peroxide, hydrogen buckyballs. No models, and none of these models are tritium, by the way, I might add. We've never seen a single model from a nuclear meltdown of tritium. It's a good thing, because tritium apparently is the scariest creature in the world. Well, it is. If you add it to nuclear weapons, you can double, quadruple their power. Higher than usual levels of radiation detected by monitoring stations in Alaska, Alabama, California, Guam, Hawaii, Idaho, Nevada, Saipan, Northern Mariana Islands, Washington State over the past week. Fukushima radiation still circling the globes. The levels are consistently in rise and fall in the 40-day cycles. These were studies I dug up because we wanted to quantify what was going on a few different ways, right? So I'm a sucker for punishment. And I dug up, this is airborne fission in the high Arctic after. This was behavior of radioactive cesium during incineration of radioactive contaminated waste from decontamination activities in Fukushima. So they're doing the decontamination activity, then they're going to burn it in the incinerator and do studies on it, how it comes across the Pacific corridor, airborne, 5,500 miles. So instead of storing it for thousands of years, they burn it and release it back into the environment, and then do a study, make a living. like a perpetual misery machine, isn't it? Like when I see that study, there's so many of these moments. It's just what a weird planet Earth is. If aliens come here, like what the freak is going on? Arrival of nuclides released by Fukushima to the Canary Islands, and decontamination of, like, you can't, let me say this up front. What they're talking about here is decontaminating vegetables from radioactive fallout from Fukushima. And look at all the people on the study. This is how they pay their mortgages and all the sports activities for their children, have champagne parties and cocktail parties and everything else. They just tell a whole bunch of lies and Yankee Doodle Dandy. You can't decontaminate. Many kinds of vegetables were contaminated by a huge amount of radioactivity. Was higher than value at the legal limits for shipment. Therefore, we attempted to identify a simple, effective removal method for contaminated farm products to ensure the relief of farmers, mass murderers, and the security of consumers. So they're talking about how to clean vegetables that are too radioactive to eat. Just like, how did we ever get to this point in life where this was an option? How did we become that complacent that this became an option? And that's exactly what happened. We became complacent. And the crazies were like, hey, they're not even paying attention anymore. Let's do observation of Fukushima fallout in Great Britain. Detection of xenon-133 in Fukushima plant in the upper troposphere above Germany. 450,000 times above detection in America and Canada, so which means everybody's being pounded. Radioactive contamination from the South Korea public following nuclear accident. Dry disposition velocity of cesium-134, 137 in Spain. Artificial radionuclides in Russia, because they're man-made, artificial. Indicators Fukushima radioactive releases in Romania. Detection of radio xenon in Darwin, Australia. Italy, airborne cesiums, iodines due to Fukushima in Italy. In France, evidence of cesiums and iodines. Atmospheric radionuclides in Vietnam, British Columbia, Canada, Lithuania, Taiwan, the list is going on. Monaco, radioactive fallout everywhere. And the numbers we see, we can quantify. These are not 1 or 2 becquerels per cubic meter. These are, holy shit. Tape up the windows and the doors, honey. Radioactive pollution in Athens, Greece due to Fukushima. Radioactive impact, and I got just an absurd amount of this. I'm not going to do it to you tonight. Plume previous pathways, cesium iodines, activities at high altitude European locations after Fukushima air mass. Well, the plume, as we know now, was continuous plume. And here's the model France made of the radioactive fallout. And I'll tell you when you're at 20 days. You're currently at 14 days. You're now coming up 20 days. The whole planet is covered at 20, and it doesn't stop, right? It still continues to come out. That's a pretty accurate model. That's France's model. Where am I to? Oh my God, I'm gone. Oh, goodness gracious, here I am. I was getting worried. I thought I went off into the ether world. Poison particles. I love that term, eh? Poison particles. From nuclear plant found in at least 12 U.S. states. There are worries where further compacted by the discovery of a pool of radioactive water. That's the 30th, right? Yeah, the 30th. 1,000 years from now, contaminated water from Fukushima may still enter the Pacific Ocean. But there was a pool of water, Dana. That was the distraction, was the pool of water, right? 3 out of the complex's 6 reactors believed to partially melted down. This is on the 30th. It's impossible not to know that and write an article in the major media. I'm not sure. I think they might have melted down, Dana. It's hard to say, though. I'm not a nuclear expert or nothing. You don't need to be. How about this one here? This is reactor 4. Which one is the real picture? You don't have to hold your breath or nothing, do you? Anybody? Never mind. We do not believe the radioactive water is leaking into the ocean. You don't believe it's leaking into the ocean? How about covering the entire planet and the oceans in just a couple of days? Covering the entire planet and the entire biosphere in just a couple of weeks. It never goes away either. It pulses energy at the speed of light every second. It attacks everything with replicating cells. Part of the power, the plant had been reconnected to the grid, Dana. I was looking for the power lines, but I don't see them. I'm not sure, did they connect the top part or the bottom part? I think they connected the top part, Dana. You're only showing people the bottom part. Dana's fear-mongering you. How come Dana doesn't show you the top part of the plant where the power lines are connected? You should ask yourself that. Because he's fear-mongering. That has left officials with a difficult situation, pumping water in to keep the fuel rods cool. This is on the 30th. They're halfway around the planet. And pumping out and safely storing the contaminated water. And during the breaks, they're allowed to go pony riding on a unicorn, Dana. And Bigfoot helps them get on the unicorn. It's pretty amazing. April 21st, 2014, TEPCO is unable to bring the contaminated water issue under control. That's 3.5 years later. They still can't bring it under control. The highly contaminated water. Contaminated. Oh, and the Advanced Liquid Processing System, you might know as the ELPS, has yet to function reliably because it's highly contaminated. The contaminated water has been emitting radiation exposure more than 4 times the amount the government considers safe for workers. Per liter is around 2 sieverts per liter. And 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. So 2 liters is a lethal dose. We're talking. TEPCO plans to dump the water stored at Fukushima Dai-ichi into the Pacific. This helps explain the last part. The plant has already released an enormous amount of highly contaminated water directly into the ocean from a plethora of leaks from the reactor buildings, from the stumps, the ghost of the Fukushima reactors. After the water passed through the crippled units, no mercy, eh? They got a lie in every sentence. It is processed through the series system, because, the ELP system's not working, to remove cesium and other systems designed to remove other radioactive materials have been overwhelmed by the complexity and concentrations of contamination found at Dai-ichi. Overwhelmed. In other words, they didn't work. The REVA system didn't work. The ELP system didn't work. The series system didn't work. Dana didn't work. His brain is finally shut down. Give me a sec. I got to poke that where it's supposed to be. And normally this is where I apologize for taking so long to get through a couple of friggin' stories. I can't do it. I'm too upset with the nuclear industry. They spoiled my day again. Why you gotta be like that all the time for? Messing with me. There we go. I got that fixed. God help us. Okay, let's keep going. Right there. I don't really. I usually just because we covered the details so much, and I apologize because there's so many constraints to tell the same story over and over. Unfortunately, that's part of the story. That's the answer to a lot of the equations, right? And so you got to reinforce it, but you got to remind people it exists because that's the equation. They're going to take a stroll down and look at a town that don't exist anymore and a bunch of big boats that are in an impossible place. This is Miyagi Prefecture. Miyagi Prefecture is a nasty wasteland even today. They're burying victims. No one even knows who they are. They don't even know who the victims are. Unidentified tsunami victims. Exactly where the water is coming from remains unclear, though many suspect it's cooling water is leaked from one of the disabled reactors, Dana. Let's see about reactor 4. Does that look like it's disabled? Does it look like it's leaking to anybody? Does that look like it could leak? Once a leaker, always a leaker. You know what they say, right? 2 sieverts an hour of beta radiation emitted from a single liter of leaked. Such a terrible word, eh? That word should be banned from the dictionaries after Fukushima, shouldn't it? It should be illegal to use it. It should be like a $55,000 fine to use the word leaked. Leak, I'll leak, yeah. It could take weeks to pump out the radioactive water, says Gary was, a bastard, a nuclear engineering professor at the University of Michigan. All right, there's another one. The best, the most elite in all the nuclear industry has to offer came out and stabbed you in the back. That's not where the Pop-Tart what is, right? New readings also show ocean contamination spread about a mile further. A mile further. This is plutonium. Hang on. There's so much I get lost. Yeah, this is plutonium fallout covering the entire planet. So yeah, about a mile further, I guess. That sounds about right, about a mile further. Clear prop. Wow. Oh, so there's 4 Medusas in a row. Look at that. Number 3, she's pretty though. Look at her. That's quite the charmer right there, boy. Don't call that Medusa. Reactor 2 is a Medusa too, right? It burnt and caught fire and blew up and caught fire and burnt continuously for several days. Blew up, caught fire. Contaminated water in Unit 2 tested a radiation level some 100,000 times above normal. You ain't checking anything. There's zero possibility people are checking water at Unit 2. It's zero. TEPCO official said yesterday radiation is leaking water in Unit 2 was 10 million times above normal. But the day ended with officials saying the figure had been miscalculated and the level was actually 100,000 times normal. Still very high, but far better than the earlier results. There's no one checking the water in reactor 2. That's a lethal dose just walking, running past it. Surges in airborne radioactive release has gone on for years. 2014 exceeded 25,000 times normal level. Extensive areas impacted. 16th of March, this is the last day when reactor 4 is blowing up over and over and the fuel pool is blowing up over and over. New fire at Fukushima, that'll be reactor 4. Not Fukushima. The blaze struck reactor 4 at the Dai-ichi plant for the second time in 2 days. And that's why I get confused sometimes, because it did blow up on the 15th, right? But it blew up again on the 14th, or the 16th, which is when this story came out. Officials say it appears to be out, but smoke was then seen rising from reactor 3. I don't know, let's have a look at it, I suppose. I think they might need some paint, bit of gyp rock, fire her back up. Salon said they were going to start it back up, right? Salon.com. Oh, they're going to fire up reactor 3. It's not as bad. They'll let the fearmongers trick you. Nuclear is good. They stabbed you in the back. 24 hours earlier on Tuesday morning, another fire broke out in the spent fuel storage pond at reactor 4. Stop calling them ponds, you bastards. These are pools. Ponds are cool. Pools are friggin' scary. Well, let me see. Did the spent fuel pool blow up at reactor 3? That's a roger. Roger that. The reactor was shut down before the quake for maintenance. Yeah, but you're only going to take out at best half the fuel. The other half is still in the reactor core. Unless you're going to do work on the reactor core and repair the reactor core, which means you're going to shut it down for 6 or 8 months, and you weren't, which meant it was half full of reactor cores. And they say that this explosion categorically did not happen at reactor 3 and 4, and reactor 4 absolutely unequivocally does not look like that. That's Dana's fear-mongering. And reactor 3 did not blow up, and you didn't feel the explosion 25 miles away, so stop the fear-mongering. Tokyo, which is not a decommissioning authority, was bankrupt by this time. Well, this is the 16th, rather, which operated the plant, said it may pour water and fire retardant from a helicopter. Like, fire retardant is not going to stop a fuel rod from melting down. The fuel rods are splitting the atoms is the problem, period. From being exposed to the air and releasing even more radioactivity. That's the 16th. But it already blowed up a couple of dozen times. They admit to several. Well, that's reactor 3. That's 190 feet tall. That's 19-story building that's 50 meters tall, basically. Right? Well, no. There's only a stump left, Dana. Official says the explosion at the first 3 reactors and possibly the 4th as well were caused by a buildup of hydrogen. Well, let's check in with CNN, ABC, BBC, CBS. You guys want to take it away?
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daini nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
And you thought I was crazy. I got some stiff competition right there, tell you what. Chief Cabinet Secretary, the lowlife in Dano, said cooling seawater was being pumped into the reactors 1 and 3, which were returning to normal. How much water can you get into that little stump, I wonder? On the 16th, Reactor 4 was kaput, and so was Reactor 3. There's Reactor 3 and 4. So you think they were returning to normal? Anybody? This is normal, though, so don't get too upset. It's normal. So we're pumped into Reactor 1 and 3, I'm sorry. Well, one went China syndrome, right? The fuel pool detonated, and then the reactor core went China syndrome shortly the day after. Japan's Nuclear Safety Agency earlier says it's suspected the blast may have damaged the reactor's 2 suppression chamber, which would have allowed radioactive steam to escape. Well, let's look at Reactor 3 and 4, see how bad they are. And so let's talk about Reactor 2 because it doesn't look as bad. Unit 2 completely liquefied. 100% liquefaction of a uranium core. We've never seen this before in the history of nuclear power. After Tuesday's explosion and fire, radiation doses up to 400 millisieverts per hour. Listen, once you got reactors blowing up and catching fire and detonating, doses of 400 millisieverts would be a disaster, but that's a dream that they're that small. And so the Reactor 1, it was over 1 million sieverts per hour, according to the flyovers. That's why the helicopters couldn't go back. That's why they abandoned the site. On 16th, it was abandoned, right? There was nobody there. This is the problem. You're going through this old news cycle, and you're reading the story, and you're like, oh, shit, that's a lie. And that's every other paragraph, if not every paragraph, is a lie. And they say a dose of 1,000 millisieverts, which is a sievert, can cause temporary radiation sickness. No, you just will strip the hair from your body, cause you to vomit uncontrollably. Saying 0.6 millisieverts per hour is recorded at the main gate, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Like, the ones you're supposed to turn to are the ones that are going to cut your throat the most. Japan has also announced a 30-kilometer no-fly zone. Don't want no pictures getting out. To prevent planes from spreading radiation further afield. No, they don't want the pilots falling out of the sky from radiation. And they don't want you getting pictures. Plutonium found leaking out of the nuclear plant. Leaking. Oh, that's NPR. That's NPR. Man, they were vicious. They were absolutely vicious. Where were we from? Highly toxic plutonium has seeped into the soil around the troubled. They found plutonium in every sample throughout the prefecture, and lots of it, and farther than that by far. But every sample in that prefecture, and what was it? 516,000 samples, spots that they were doing readings at. Think about that statement. And it was like 40,000 of them 9 years later were still the same numbers. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. It contaminated the entire biosphere, the entire oceans, all the fresh water, all the land mass. They wrecked the glaciers. They accelerated the 80 years of global warming into overdrive. Global warming is 80 years of nuclear emissions into the environment, disguised as life, which is carbon. And carbon emissions don't create plumes that covers the planet, pulsing energy at the speed of light on top of that. Plutonium levels were so low, it could have been from soil almost anywhere on Earth. NPR's Joe Hamilton reported from Tokyo. An analyst of the specific radioisotopes suggests material came from a nearby reactor. Officials said the finding of plutonium supports suspicion of radioactive waters leaking from the damage. Well, plutonium is airborne, it's gas, once it's left taken under pressure. And containments, rather. Water is leaking from damaged nuclear fuel rods inside the plant, which has been hobbled by crisis after crisis since the March 11 earthquake and tsunami. I got to go back to the beginning of that story. Yeah, March the 16th. It's really something that they have to tell so many lies in a single story. Presence of plutonium, which is named after the devil, by the way, at the plant adds to the evidence that the overheated fuel rods began to melt. Well, this is the 16th. You had detonation after detonation. Come on. There was 21,000 pounds in my numbers of plutonium, which is 2% of the fuel, right? It apparently caused a variety of radioactive materials to get in the water and steam that escaped from the reactors. The reactors are gone. They're completely compromised and lost their inventories and the fuel pools too. On Tuesday, crews continued to work to bring electricity back to the facility and managed to turn the lights on in the control room of Unit 4. But they never went back for 7 years, which is a really big coincidence to that story. And they didn't turn the lights on. There's reactor 4. Yeah, don't worry, we got the lights on. These people are maniacs, man. They're just maniacs, heartless maniacs. You can't have a soul of any type to work for the nuclear industry from what we're seeing. It's just untenable what they're doing. On Tuesday, crews continued to work to bring electricity back to the facility and managed to turn on the lights in the control room in Unit 4. I'll never get tired of that. That is one of my favorite my God stories in the last 15 minutes. I got to put that somewhere so I can find it later. Because people are like, no, that's not true, Dana. No one's that crazy. I was like, no, we're talking about nuclear. And they're like, oh, shit, I never thought about nuclear. Damn you, Dana. You tricked me. Here we go. I got that put where I can find it some other time. When it makes me giggle, it's pretty tough, man. You know, it's a sad day when I laugh. Because I wallow in this excrement all day, every day, right? So if it can get under my skin, it's pretty bad. Oh, shit, I lost where it was too. Maybe that's a good thing. I got no idea. Oh, crap, I found where I was supposed to be. Damn it. I was enjoying being lost. How sad is that? They also worked to lay cables, restore electric pumps to keep the water circulating in the reactor cores, so they will not have to manually pump in the water. Yeah, you got the water circulating in the cores there, Dana. Because this is the 16th, this picture. Same day the story is written. I think it's amazing that they can circulate water in the reactor cores of buildings that don't exist anymore. Scientists are real special creatures, I tell you what. On Tuesday, crews continued work to bring electricity back to the facility. And they got the lights on. I can't read that anymore without laughing. My God. Whoever that was got a bonus, I can guarantee you. They also worked to lay cables, restored electric pumps. No, we already done that. It's going to kill me if I read that again. Workers had to cut back the amount of water they're pumping in the reactor too. Which caused the rods to heat and the core temperature to rise slightly. And the daily readings from the reactor indicate on Tuesday the temperatures and pressure in Unit 2 reactor were rising. Everything was melted down on the 16th, which is when they wrote this story. Radioactivity on the surface water found just outside the turbine building at Unit 2, which you still can't get into today, 12 years later. The Reactor 2 reactor is particularly high at over 1,000 millisieverts, 1 sievert. 1 sievert what? Per liter? Like you can't call it per hour in this circumstance. It has to be per liter per gallon or something, right? And Unit 2 had already gone China syndrome from the inside, right? It burned continuously for 2 days. And some headlines suggest it burned continuously for a week before it went down into the earth in the China syndrome. That's more than 4 times the amount of radiation the government considers safe. Dana? The water got to be pumped out before electricity can be restored to the reactor's cooling system. Like, the column Maniacs doesn't really do it justice enough. The Nuclear Industry and Safety Agency said TEPCO is unsure of the source of new pools of radioactive water near the plant. It's probably caused by the detonations in multiple nuclear reactors and fuel pools melting down at the same time there. TEPCO, because you don't blame the nuclear industry, you blame TEPCO, a corporation. We're very focused on helping them to restore the cooling of buildings that don't exist no more. Bill Bolshar, who we've covered quite a bit from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and I don't know where to look for that video right now. I think I probably could find it. Let me see if I can find it, because that's a funny video. Bill Bolshar. What do I look for? I wonder. We haven't played that for quite a while. Oh. Oh, I know. Hang on. I can probably find it that way, but... Bill Bouchard. It's worded. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. I got it there somewhere else, but I used to cover it pretty regular once upon a time. Yeah, I probably won't find it. Oh, speak there. What's the odds of that? Will the video even play? No. I got to reformat those videos because with the new operating system, it no longer plays the old formats, unfortunately. Bill Bouchard, which is the executive director for the operation, he was working with Jasko, Gregory Jasko. And he was supposed to come in and update Congress, Senate, on what's going on in Fukushima. And the head of the NRC was running late, so Bill Bouchard was standing in until Jasko showed up, right? And every time the senators would ask him a question, he said, well, I can't answer that one. And it's a very funny clip because I chopped it up. And NPR's John Hamilton contributed to the report, which contains material from the Degenerate Associate Press. March 11th, Japan investigates a possible nuclear meltdown. So on day one, they're investigating a nuclear meltdown. And they were evacuating. It wouldn't affect humans beyond a 10-kilometer. And Rohi Shiomi said the officials were checking whether a meltdown taken place. Salon. Remember our time with Salon earlier claimed they're going to fire up reactors 3 and 4? The story was Japan explains nuclear crisis to kids with a cartoon about poop and farts. Should I restore your faith in humanity? Let's try it. With all the problems facing the land of the rising radiation plume, only one metaphor makes sense: defecation. Farts and poop. It's hard not to hate the nuclear industry when you see shit like this. As we speak, emergency crews are trying to contain the radiation leaking out of the cracked reactors. What was the date on that? I know that's going to be a winner. That's March the 17th, the day after all 4 reactors have finally detonated. Cracked reactors. The buildings are actually gone, reactor 3 and 4, right? But how do you explain all this to children living in the nuclear wasteland, or in the nuclear wasteland of Japan in general? Their lives have been disrupted, and while earthquakes and storms are ideas they may be able to comprehend, nuclear science is not. That's why Japanese artists has made a cartoon to help ease the small minds of the nation. Nuclear Boy chronicles Fukushima reactor cracks and radiation leaks in a way that's easily relatable to children. Nuclear power plant had a tummy ache, and we're trying to make sure it's not going to take a great big poop all over the country. I don't know if I can read this. That's a little bit too much for my brain tonight. The nuclear power plant had a tummy ache, and we're trying to make sure it's not going to take a great big shit all over the country. That's a little bit easier. Let's go with that. I'm all for explaining stuff to children in a light and humorous way to take the edge of all such a terrifying event. But I also never thought I'd be more disturbed by the images of Chernobyl until I started thinking about them covered in explosive diarrhea. Don't you kind of lose faith in humanity when you see shit like that? Don't you just like, where's the line? There is no line that they won't cross. And the contempt is so vivid. It's so incredibly vivid. Drew Grant is a staff writer for Salon. Japan explains the nuclear crisis to kids. I don't know anymore, man. Don't you just like wonder how the hell did we ever denigrate to this? You remember that Veritasium? And he had done a video or a documentary, a real documentary that was on TV with CNN. And he equated everything in Fukushima with bananas. And at one point he had like 50,000 bananas or something. It was really disgusting. And I came out and challenged the whole video. And people started to turn around against him. He took it off his site. But CNN had it everywhere for months and months straight. And he done similar tricks later about it. But there was a whole lot of people attacked me when I came out and said, this is, explained the lies, went through methodically through all the lies. And he's huge. He gets like 6 or 10 million views on each video. And he's 100% propaganda. And I remember one of the commenters that attacked me was saying, what's wrong with a guy trying to make a buck, right? And I said, well, you're sacrificing millions and billions of people so you can make a paycheck. If you got that kind of talent, why didn't you do something reasonable? Why do you got to be so fucking evil? Of course, they're not going to reply to that stuff, right? The nuclear power plant had a tummy ache, and we're trying to make sure it's not going to take a great big fucking shit all over the country. So that I can live with. Maybe. I think that's enough torture for everybody tonight. I apologize. Probably should have quit 5 minutes ago before we got to that last story. Now, we explained, should nuclear scientists stop killing the homeless, the destitute, the immigrants that don't speak the language, and the victims of society at nuclear meltdowns? For probably 25 or 30 minutes at the beginning, it took me to get through that, to show you the documentation, because that's who's there, not nuclear scientists. There is no such thing as a hero nuclear scientist. Never will be either. Anyway, what difference does it make? Let's close the poll down. Let's bring in some cheerio music. There's enough beating my brains out tonight and everybody else's. You guys are such wonderful people to put up with all this poop. A nuclear plant gets a tummy ache and then it poops all over the country. And the poop kills all the birds and insects and animals and mammals and everything else. Sorry. One last time. Should nuclear scientists stop killing the homeless, the destitute, the immigrants that don't speak the language, the victims of society that are shanghaied and brought to the nuclear meltdown to get lethal doses and then disregarded like a paper towel? Yeah, Dana, yeah, that sounds pretty reasonable. Well, thank you very much. May I have another? That's a good poll. Thank you, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. You're welcome, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Potassium 40 enrichment. Banana grenades. There you go. Count on James, man. Good night, everyone. Yeah, it looks awesome. Thank you, folks. Tomorrow night, we're probably going to do a news cycle because I got a really friggin' banging nuclear cycle to get through. And I still got another show just like this I would like to get out of the way this week, so I'm not sure. But these shows are really difficult because you're swamped with the original bombardment of lies in that first couple of weeks. It's pretty vicious, isn't it? Like, and I mean, every second sentence or every paragraph is full of lies. You've got the mother lode right there, right? If that was like fishing, you'd be pulling a fish out of the water in the pond every minute or something for the entire day of Saturday. That's what these stories are like. Anyway, last night was a weird night because we didn't finish till late. And it's all good. We'll give it up. I'll let you get on with your lives. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. We got a doozy. We got a couple of really just like wow shows ready to go. We got another show like this ready to go, so who knows? I might be a sucker and punish myself again tomorrow night and do one more of these and get it out of the way, but this is 2 shows in a row, right? Yeah. Well, catch everybody tomorrow night, 24 hours. We'll be back again, crying and whining about how evil the nuclear industry is. They'll never disappoint us. One thing we count on is nuclear is going to be evil tomorrow too. It's a given. Good night, everybody. Take care. Make this fair. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. We got more right now than we had all day today and last night combined.